time for our vitally important segment of the show, I would say. We've been talking about this throughout the year. It's called Savvy Savings. It's where we figure out how to save us all money, especially, of course, when we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. And you may or may not have placed savings in your savings account at the top of the list with that. Perhaps you've been able to add to it, you've maybe decreased how much you're adding to it, or you find yourself dipping into it. Well, I'm joined now with Susie Laws, who's a financial expert, here to tell us the best way to manage our savings. Susie, lovely to speak to you on BBC Radio London. Firstly, even amongst all that's going on with the cost of living crisis, energy bills, why is it still important to have a savings account?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, no, it's vital. Everybody needs to have an emergency fund because the inevitable happens. Something breaks, the car, the roof, it could be anything. And you need to have some money set aside in an ideal world so that you're not having to rely on credit.
It's quite interesting, the fact that you said, because some people may or may not be thinking about their credit, but long term, that's important, isn't it?
It is, because obviously we've seen interest rates go up, and that has sort of two effects. One is that you're obviously getting more interest potentially on your savings, but also it means you'll be paying more interest on credit cards, loans. So if you can avoid having credit facilities, then obviously it is definitely beneficial to do so over the longer term.
So then what would you suggest if somebody has been, if they've got a savings account, firstly, Susie? Because most of the time, most people will, right? If you've been to your bank, it tends to be that at some point you will have opened a savings account. Yeah. But what if you've been dipping into it too much? Is that something that should be a concern, or it's just the times that we're living in?
It's a bit of both, really. Obviously, there's always going to be times when you're potentially having to draw more on your savings than you're able to put in just because of circumstances and things that crop up. However, if that starts to happen month after month after month, then it's really, really important, if you can, to start having a look at the budgeting and just sort of figuring out why that's happening if you can, and if there's any ways in which you can potentially look to change that. Obviously, cost of living crisis, as you've mentioned, it's not always easy for people to save at the moment. So it's, all very well and good saying, reduce your spending, try and save where you can. It's not always that easy, but equally, having a look regularly at your bank accounts, what you're spending, what's going in, what's going out, can be really, really illuminating. And then trying to create a realistic budget. I really stress the word realistic because we all build a budget, and it's an ideal world scenario. It's built around what we think we can save. The reality is you're still going to want to live. People want to have some enjoyment in life. So it's trying to be realistic with that and having one eye on the future, but also trying to do a little bit of the fun stuff that you want to do now. So if you do something that's not realistic, ultimately each month you'll just fail. And that can be quite demoralising as well. So that realism is really important as a foundation to starting to build good habits around savings.
Now, we've recently, of course, heard about the cost of regulated rail fares in England. They're going to be rising by up to 4.9% from Sunday. That's going to be a big change for a lot of people. And as you're on right now talking to me about savings and realistic goals, I've had a look at my app, and a lot of us will do our banking nowadays on our apps. And there is a section which I know is so underused in my app, and I wonder what your thoughts are for anyone else tuning in, which is to do with insights. A lot of banks will do this, where they'll show you your footprint, your spending, the plans perhaps for you can even look at what you've done in the last couple of months to really weigh out how well you've been spending on or saving. What are your thoughts? Do you think we should make use of this? Because clearly the banks are doing it for us, and I know I'm looking at mine and I haven't used it, Susie. I haven't used it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that the banks can do to help. Obviously, that is one thing that they offer, and it's really important just to get that understanding about how you're spending money, because it's about habits. We all have our habits. We all like doing the little things that we like doing, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're also looking for longer term goals, be it saving for a house, be it a holiday, then it's important to kind of balance the now, what you like doing now, but also what you want to do in future. So using things like the insights around spending is really important, but also a lot of the banks and the apps now will have the facility where you can save your change. So they round up your purchases, and this can be a really easy way of just putting little small amounts aside, and you don't even notice it, into a savings account. So, for instance, if you were to spend, £7 or £8 on something in a shop, it potentially would round that up, to the nearest pound. So it just, again, you're getting, 50p, a couple of pounds going in here and there, and you don't really noticing it because it's just coming out as part of your regular spending. So that can be, again, a nice little habit-forming way of building a pot that you're not thinking about too much. So there's lots of things that the banks can do, and obviously shop around as well is the main thing to say when it comes to any bank and the rates they're giving you in terms of savings. If you're lucky enough to have savings, make sure you're actually getting some interest at the moment, because there are some really good interest paying accounts.
Interesting that, because what are we saying? If you've got a savings account already, but you see that another bank is offering a better deal, what are you meant to do in that type of situation? Are you then going to shut down your savings, transfer over to another? Like, what do you mean by shop around?
Exactly that, really. So, yeah, obviously you're even within your own bank, because you could be in a savings account without realising it, that you actually potentially there are other savings accounts with your bank that are offering a better rate. And the bank aren't obviously obligated to notify you of that. Some do, but most don't. So, if you're in an account that's paying 0.5% interest at the moment, that's actually a really, really poor rate. And you can easily get, even on instant access, between sort of 3 to 4% interest on an account. If you're happy to tie that up and not have access to it for a period, then you can get more like 4.5 to 5% on a savings account. So it could be just even looking at what else your bank is offering, and if there's a good rate there and it's easier, then absolutely fine. Open a new account with the bank that you're already with, or you can obviously move the money out of your savings back into your current account with your bank, and then move that from there into another savings account with a different institution. So it's just having a little look at what you're currently getting and whether there are any better alternatives out there.
And just to ask a very frank question, Susie, if someone's tuning in and saying, I get all of this, in fact, I know I've been doing this for years, but in the last, let's say 12 months, I've dipped on to everything because of the cost of living crisis. If I have any kind of saving, it's going to be pounds or even pennies rather than hundreds of pounds. Is there any point in me even thinking about that? What would you say to them? Because that's a very realistic question for what some people are dealing with right now here in London.
Absolutely it is. And I would always say yes. It doesn't matter how small. I mean, obviously, yes, it's in an ideal situation. The more you can save, the better. But it's just getting into that habit. It's getting into that mindset of putting aside what you can. And then hopefully, obviously, the cost of living crisis will not last forever and you'll be in a stronger position. But even putting aside £10 or £20 a month gives you a pot towards something that you might need, be it a cost or something you might like to do in future. And again, it's about thinking about the goal. Be clear in your own mind about what the goal and the timescale is around what you're saving for. Because if you're saving for retirement, for instance, then actually putting aside small amounts in your 20s is absolutely fine, because you've got 40 years ahead of you to grow, to get some growth in a pension or whatever vehicle you're using. So it doesn't matter if it's a small amount. It's just really vitally important that people think about, if they can, putting something aside for future.
So what you're saying is sometimes we think of saving short term, maybe for a holiday this year, maybe to get, some new equipment for sports for the kids next year, whatever it is, or, something sorted out in the garage, in the garden, or just a quick change that you need to do for the kitchen. That's short term sometimes, but you're talking more long term. Think about the decades ahead as well.
Yeah,
and even if you feel it's minimal, that's going to add up then, isn't it, if it's over the decades?
It is, absolutely. And it's about having a balance. It's about the short term and the long term. So I always, when I say to clients about thinking about saving, it's a case of be clear in your mind what the goal is, and then have different pots allocated for each of those goals. So you could have some short term goals, and that could be a holiday or something you want to do, as you say, with the family. Absolutely fine. But in your mind, earmark the amount of money that you feel you can do towards that. And then, but don't forget about the longer term goal as well. Always have, if you can, don't just push that forward to future, because small amounts now will make a big difference over a long period of time.
And finally, how can people get in touch if they'd like more details, Susie?
Obviously, feel free to contact us via our website, fiduciawealthmanagement.co.uk. But yeah, always reach out to a qualified financial advisor.
Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Pleasure having you on the show,
Thank
Susie.
You. Take care.
Susie Laws, financial expert. Do listen back. Some top tips. We haven't just solely focused on this before, just on savings, the kind of savings accounts you need to be looking at, and the type of percentage rates as well. You can listen back. BBC Sounds. Type in my name, Shay Kaur Grewal.